Well, hello, this is Jeff Gaudiosi, and you're on misplacedstraws.com where music comes to life. And my guest today is one of the great voices in rock history. From his time with the Elvin Bishop Band through the heyday of Jefferson's Starship and then Starship, he has supplied the voices to countless classics. He's back now with his versions of some Christmas classics. Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas and The Most Wonderful Time of the Year. It's just an honor to welcome Mickey Thomas. Welcome, Mickey.
Well, thank you so much. Nice to be with you, Jeff.
So now, one of your first recordings with Elvin Bishop way back in 1975 was a version of Silent Night.
Yeah.
After all these years, what led you back to Christmas music?
Oh, I've always wanted to do Christmas music, a Christmas album. And, for years and years, I've thought about doing it, but the real opportunity just never came up until now. I expressed to my manager that I've always had a desire to do some Christmas music. So he kind of arranged the session with a friend of his who is a producer in Nashville. And he put together, the players and kind of set the whole thing up, made it easy for me. So I said, well, these are the songs I want to do because I'm interested. I like classic Christmas songs, traditional Christmas, the things that I grew up listening to as a kid. I'm not a big fan of rocking up Christmas too much, run, run, Rudolph, I don't do that. I like more like I'll be home for Christmas. So I wanted to just do that, capture that vibe and that feeling of, the classic and traditional Christmas songs that I grew up listening to. And the singers I liked back then, Jack Jones and Andy Williams and Tony Bennett and Nat King Cole. And so that's what we went with.
Well, and classics are classics for a reason.
Yeah.
All of those singers you just mentioned, those songs were recorded back in 40s and 50s, and you still hear them on the radio every year currently.
Yeah.
There's a reason that those standards become that way.
Exactly. And it takes us, what I like about it is because it's, it comes around every year. So, you hear the same songs that you heard when you were 5 years old or 10 years old or 20 years old. So it takes you back to that time, to that feeling of Christmas, which hopefully for everyone is a very warm and nostalgic and happy feeling, a happy time. So, Christmas songs have the power to do that, to kind of,
Without a doubt.
cut off the stuff that's bothering us and making us feel down.
Now, were there any other songs you were considering? Is there a chance that maybe next year or in the future we'll see that full-length Christmas record?
Yes, very much so. As I said, it's just something I've wanted to do for a long time. So we said, well, let's test the waters, because with the way music is created and delivered in this day and age, it's not like, well, we just have to jump right in and do a whole album right now. Let's start out with a couple of songs. We'll put out the 2 singles, and if we get some good reaction, if it seems like people want to hear more, then Christmas 2024 we'll have a whole album ready to go, and kind of approach it that way.
Well, I got to tell you, as a guy that has what my wife tends to refer to as an unhealthy obsession with Christmas music, I hope we see that. I love your take on these classics and would really be interested to see what you do with some others.
Oh yeah, I'm Silver Bells is definitely one I want to do. I'll Be Home for Christmas is definitely would be one. Give Me an Old Fashioned Christmas. I kind of want to keep it in that sort of that kind of mellow, nostalgic vein where you imagine that you're just sitting in front of the fire, with the snow falling outside the window and having a glass of brandy or something.
Sounds perfect.
Yeah.
Now looking back through your career a bit, back in the really early days, you were singing with a band called the Jets when you first started as a backing vocalist for Elvin Bishop.
Yeah.
How did you first meet Elvin, and what was that move from, okay, I'm a backing vocalist, to becoming the voice of some of his biggest solo hits?
Yeah. I had actually met Elvin in 1972 when I was in San Francisco for that year, performing with a gospel singer who was my mentor, who really taught me how to sing, and he was friends with Elvin Bishop. So his name was Gideon Daniels, my mentor, and Gideon introduced me to Elvin. And back then, Gideon and I would go and hang out and jam with Elvin whenever he might be playing around San Francisco, some of the local clubs or whatever. And so I got to know Elvin through that. Then I went back to Georgia in 1973 and 74 when I was in the Jets band. And during that time, Elvin signed with Capricorn Records, which was based in Macon, Georgia. Mm-hmm. So he came down to Georgia to record a couple of albums, and he knew that I had subsequently moved back to Georgia myself. So he called me up and said, "Hey, we're only a 3-hour drive away. You want to come up and sing some background vocals on my record?" So I went up to Macon, did that, and it went really well. And so the next year he came back to do his next album for Capricorn and said, "Hey, want to come up and sing some more?" Because it was good last time. So I said, "Sure." So I went up, and that was the album right before Strutting My Stuff. So at that point in time, he said, "Well, hey, how would you like to just join the band? You know, because we need some help vocally, and you know, as a backing vocalist, and we also did some duets. Elvin and I would trade off the lead vocals sometimes. So I joined the Elvin Bishop band, and we toured for about 6 months together, and then we were off to Miami, Florida, to do the Strutting My Stuff album, and then during the course of making that album, we recorded Fooled Around and Fell in Love, and Elvin was going to sing it originally, but his voice didn't quite seem to fit the lyric, you know, and the mood of the song and the track, the way we had cut it. So the producer, the great Bill Simzik, suggested or asked me, he said, "What would you like to give this one a shot?" You know, and I said, "Oh, hell yeah." So that's how it happened. It was kind of a spontaneous moment in the studio, and I jumped out and did the lead vocals on Fooled Around and Fell in Love, and it was 2 takes. There was one take, one track before the guitar solo, and one track after the guitar solo, and that was it. And that you know, it obviously became a gigantic hit for the Elvin Bishop band, and opened many doors for me in my career.
You know, and then a few years later, was it from working with Craig Chaquico on a soundtrack that brought you into Jefferson Starship? And how did it feel replacing icons like Marty Balin and Grace Slick?
Well, that was a daunting task, obviously. It was actually, I think Craig and I worked on that. That was a soundtrack for Skate Out, a skateboard movie, I think. And so, but we didn't really meet each other during the course of that soundtrack. I did my stuff separately from when he did his stuff. So it was really just kind of coincidental that we were both on that record. What really got me into the Jefferson Starship was one of the roadies for the band when they were, you know, as you mentioned, Grace and Marty had both left the band. So they were looking for a new singer, and kind of wondering what direction the band was going to go in, because not only had Grace and Marty left, but the drummer John Barbada had gotten into a terrible car crash, and he was out for several years. And then so Ainsley Dunbar joined the band right before I came in. So one of the roadies brought in a tape of my stuff that I had done with the Elvin Bishop band, and from my first solo album, and said, "Well, hey, check out this guy. He lives right here in the Bay Area. He's right under our noses, you know." So they listened, and Paul Kantner called me up out of the blue. You know, I'd never met any of the guys in Jefferson Starship, and so I got this unexpected phone call from Kantner saying, "Hey, you know, you want to come over and maybe hang out and jam and check out the new stuff we're working on and see how it goes. Maybe sing with the band." And I went, "Whoa, really?" I wasn't quite expecting that, because, you know, coming out of the Elvin Bishop band, blues, R&B, gospel, you know, I was wondering, well, how is what I'm doing going to fit into musically with the Jefferson Starship, you know? And I said, "Well, you know, just you know, let's come over and give it a shot, and let's see how it's going to work out." And I said, "All right, let's roll the dice and see what's going to happen here." So I decided to go over to one of the rehearsals, Paul Kentner's living room, and there we are. And they said, "Well, let's play you this. This is a new thing we're working on." And they kind of played me a real rough version of Chain. And I went, "Oh." I wasn't expecting this because, around that point in time, it was mostly Marty Balin ballads that was associated with Jefferson Starship, like Count on Me and Miracles and, Runaway. And I thought, boy, this doesn't sound anything like that. This is pretty hard edge. This is, kicking. So we started jamming on Jane. And next thing I know, we're in the studio recording Freedom at Point Zero.
And I mean, that was such a great record. I mean, you have the classic with Jane, but there's a ton of other great tracks. Girl with the Hungry Eyes is
Yeah.
amazing. And then even on to the next record with Modern Times, Grace starts coming back into the band at that point. You've had the success of the first record. Was it a little weird again to now say, okay, well, Grace is coming back and learn to work with another lead vocalist?
No, I was very excited about that possibility. We thought, it's got to be nothing but a positive to have Grace Slick come back into the band, So no, I was like everyone else. I was very excited and thrilled with the idea of being able to record and perform and hang out with Grace. It was quite a trip. I remember we were at kind of the tail end of recording the Modern Times album, and she started sort of coming around and hanging out in the studio. And then the last track we recorded was a song called Stranger for that album. So we said, well, hey, this one could be a duet. You want to come out and sing it with me, And so that was the first thing that we ever did together was Stranger. And then after that, she said, it looks like you guys are really having fun. It wasn't like this when I left the band. And we said, well, yeah, we are having fun. She said, well, hey, you guys think you could use a female background vocalist? And we said, well, maybe. Let us think about it. So we said, of course. So she rejoined the band, and it was just a great time for the two of us from that time on. We had a great working relationship, and as I said, she was just she's a very interesting, intellectual, strong personality. Just fun to hang out with, fun to talk to, and obviously our voices blended together pretty well. So we had a blast.
And after a couple more records, the big change came when Paul Kantner left the band and forced the name change to just Starship. And that was also a huge stylistic change, but songs like We Built This City, which, co-written by the great Bernie Taupin, and Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now. While those records weren't warmly received by critics, those songs define the decade. They are the 80s. Were you kind of prepared for both the success and the backlash that Starship got?
Well, I was prepared for the success because, it was we consciously set out to reinvent ourselves at that point in time, musically. It was our total intention to use all of the new recording techniques and processors, machines, and computers that were available to us at that point in time. So it was just an adventure for us. But we kind of knew at that point in time the transition that we were at, and with radio changing the way it was in the 80s, that we either were going to have a strong presence on contemporary hit radio, or we would probably not go on anymore. So the Knee Deep in the Hoopla album was definitely a gamble and a pivotal point for the history of the band, because either it was going to work or it was not going to work. So fortunately for us, it worked really well. And a lot of the critical stuff really sort of came along after the fact. It really started to steamroll with Blender magazine article in the late 90s, when Blender magazine came out with this thing about the worst songs ever recorded or something like that. And Built the City was number one on their list of the worst, even though in the top 10 there were a lot of great songs. There was, I think, there was a Stevie Wonder song, a Paul McCartney song, Huey Lewis, Phil Collins. So I'm thinking, like, well, we're a pretty good company anyway. So, and our manager at the time said, I was kind of bummed out at first, because I thought, wow, really? The worst song ever? I mean, how do you come up with that? And he said, well, Mickey, if you're going to be on a list, always be number one.
Yep.
So I said, okay. so then that kind of started the steamroll. And a lot of people picked up on that Blender thing. And then a lot of other magazines started coming out with their worst of list, which is in and of itself kind of a negative thing anyway. I don't, the next thing you know, it's like the worst guitar solos ever recorded and all that stuff. So, so the backlash kind of started almost 15 years after the song came out. But I don't worry about that at all these days, and I get it. I understand, as I've said before. Part of the reason for that was a lot of people, older fans and music critics, didn't particularly like the way that music was starting to trend in the 80s. Too much electronics, too much programming, too many sequences, too many samples, and we built this city, almost became a poster child for that whole process of making music then, that a lot of people didn't care for. The other thing was that just because of the history of our band, with Starship coming out of Jefferson Starship and Jefferson Starship coming out of Jefferson Airplane, the association with that era and with the counterculture and the revolutionary music, and the stakes were higher, I think, for Starship. The standards were higher. Yes. And so we were more than any other band of that era accused of, quote, selling out, so that was part of it too.
Well, and it's funny, one huge memory I have of that era, at the time I was working in a record store, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now was the first song to ever come out on a cassette single. And I remember selling them just by the box load because everyone was like so surprised you could now get a single that you could play in your car. So, I mean, you guys were breaking ground the whole way.
Yeah. The cover of Freedom at Point Zero album is which came out in 1979. There's kind of a strange disc on the cover of the album that the little Boy Scout is chasing on the cover of on the deck of the aircraft carrier. And that disc was actually a prototype for one of the first CDs ever. And so, it was just, it wasn't really intentional that we were kind of, in a way, signifying what was going to come, what was in store for us in the future with transitioning from the analog world to the digital world. But it happened. And it's funny when you talk about the first cassette single, if you buy a new car today, you don't even get a CD player.
Right. There's nothing in it anymore.
Yeah. My, how we've changed.
And now, over the years, you've continued to record and tour with Starship featuring Mickey Thomas.
Yeah.
Donnie Baldwin and Dave Freeberg, they have their own version of Jefferson Starship. Grace is retired and enjoying life. Do you ever see a time when you would perform with Jefferson Starship, or maybe even get Grace on the Christmas album or anything like that?
Well, now I'd love to have Grace on the Christmas album. That would be wonderful. But I just don't think that Grace is really interested at all in doing anything musical anymore. She's so involved in her painting and her art, and that's where she gets her enjoyment and her livelihood from these days. And I don't know. I sort of doubt it, but if she would do it, that would be awesome. I don't really see me Starship and Jefferson Starship getting together to do anything, because I don't know how it would really benefit either one of us right now, unless Grace was involved. But to me, any kind of Jefferson Starship reunion, if you don't have Grace Slick, then what's the point?
Right. And kind of a little off the wall, but I mean, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has always made some arbitrary decisions over the years.
Yeah.
But when you look now and you see that like the Small Faces and the Faces were inducted as one band.
Yeah.
And although they weren't inducted, Joy Division and New Order were nominated as one band. Does it ever get to you that Jefferson Starship doesn't have a spot alongside Jefferson Airplane in the hall?
Well, it does. It's not something that I lay awake at night worrying about. But I mean, I do think there's a place for it. I think it's a little tough for them to decide which version of Jefferson Starship it would be. But as you mentioned, it would be all of it,
Right.
like the small faces evolved
Mm.
into the faces or whatever. And so I would say, yes, I think that there's a place for Jefferson Starship in the hall. And I think it would be easy to do it. It would just be, everybody that was ever involved as part of Jefferson Starship. Unfortunately, many of them are no longer with us,
Right.
so it's not like you'd have a whole stage full of people up there. But I think Grace and myself, and of course Craig, um, Marty Ballin's no
Mm,
longer with us. Paul Kantner's no longer with
mm.
us, but Pete Sears is with us. Pete should definitely be up there. Ainsley Dunbar. Um, I think that would be the way to go.
Without a doubt. Well, we've been spending some time here just with the one and only Mickey Thomas. A Classic Christmas, his dual single, is going to be out December 1st. Mickey, it's been such a pleasure talking with you and going through all this. Best of luck. And hopefully, when the full Christmas album comes out, we could do this again.
I hope so. I'd love to do it anytime, man.
Thank you so much, Mickey.
Thank you, and Merry Christmas.
You as well.
All right.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you. That was a lot of fun. I really appreciate
Cool.
that.
I know I get kind of talky sometimes.
Oh,
I
that's
go on.
perfect. I don't mind that at all.
All right.
Thank you so much.